The distress signal came through at 0600 hours Galactic Standard Time, and it made every translator in the monitoring station scream with urgency coordinator. Telt's four eyes widened as he read the message from the Virani colony on Kesset 7, and his tentacles trembled against the console pirates. The Korthax Ravagers had come in force, their armada blocking the orbital lanes and trapping millions of peaceful Virani on the surface below. The message spoke of hostages and burning settlements and demands that couldn't be met. Immediately sent emergency requests to every Galactic Council peacekeeping fleet within range, but the answers that came back made his stomach sink. The nearest Council fleet was the Harmonious Dawn Battle Group, currently stationed at the Refuge Nebula 3, weeks away at maximum speed. The Virani didn't have 3 weeks, and Telth knew it from the desperate tone of their pleas. He authorized a general broadcast on all registered frequencies. A call for any ship capable of rendering aid was against protocol to involve non-council species in peacekeeping operations. But protocol didn't account for innocent people dying while bureaucrats debated proper procedure. Signal went out into the void, carrying hope and desperation in equal measure. 2 days later, a response came back. Tilth felt relief wash over him until he actually read the message. Header: Human Confederate Navy. 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Responding to your distress call. Stop current position. 14 light-years from Kesset 7. Stop ETA. 72-hour stop Marl. Sarah Vickers commanding. Stop. Telt's relief curdled into something cold and uncomfortable. Herd of humans. Though they were new to galactic society and kept mostly to themselves in their corner of space, the rumors painted them as creatures from a death world, evolved under crushing gravity and bathed in radiation that would sterilize most civilized planets. But it was the attached file that made Telth's tentacles go rigid with fear. Personnel psychological evaluations for the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Command Staff Merle Sarah Vickers, Calcine Gravedigger, flagged for aggressive tendencies, minimal emotional affect, insufficient concern for personal safety during combat operations, and what the human evaluators called dark humor, inappropriate for diplomatic contexts. Commander Marcus Webb, Executive Officer, reprimanded twice for excessive force during boarding actions, and once for threatening a superior officer who endangered his Marines. The list went on and on, each entry more alarming than the last. These weren't humanity's diplomats or scientists or peaceful explorers, fresh from something the humans called a counterinsurgency campaign. In their outer reaches, the files didn't specify what that meant. But Telth could read between the lines. These humans had been fighting, and fighting hard, against something that pushed even Deathworlders to their limits. He tried to tell himself that beggars couldn't be choosers, that any help was better than none. But deep in his genetic memory, where prey species kept their oldest fears, something whispered that they'd made a terrible mistake. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was a battered collection of ships held together by spite and salvaged parts. Or at least that's what the crew liked to say when they were drunk. Admiral Sarah Vickers stood on the bridge of the CNS Indomitable, her flagship, and studied the distress signal with eyes that had seen too much and slept too little. She was tall, even by human standards, her frame still carrying the dense muscle that came from growing up in Earth's 1G gravity. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, though several strands had escaped to frame a face that looked carved from stone. Thoughts? She asked her executive officer without looking away from the tactical display. Commander Marcus Webb scratched his jaw, fingers rasping against 3 days of stubble. Pirates hitting a civilian target. Hostages in play. No defensive capabilities worth mentioning, he said. Sounds like a turkey shoot. Ma'am Vickers almost smiled, almost the galactic equivalent of kicking puppies. She agreed, which means the locals are probably soft, bureaucratic, completely unprepared for what happens when someone decides to ignore their strongly worded letters. We gonna help them? It was a fair question. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was heading home after 18 months of brutal fighting in the outer reaches, where human colonists had been targeted by something the intelligence reports called unknown hostile actors. The fleet had found the actors, identified them, and introduced them to the concept of proportional response, which, in human military doctrine, meant hit back 3 times harder than you got hit. The campaign had been successful by every metric except the one that mattered to the people who fought it. To many good people hadn't come home. Survivors were exhausted, traumatized, and carrying the kind of anger that came from watching friends die for bureaucratic failures and intelligence breakdowns. They needed rest. Therapy and time to decompress what they didn't need was another fight, but Vickers had read the distress signal carefully. Noting the civilian casualties and the references to children among the hostages, she thought about her own niece back on Earth. About the bedtime stories she'd promised to read when she got home, plot an intercept course. She said quietly, "Maximum burn." Damn, the fuel efficiency web nodded and started relaying orders. The bridge crew moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this too many times. Their movements sharp despite their fatigue, ma'am. We're receiving a communication request from you. Someone called Coordinator Telth. The comms officer reported. He says he's the Galactic Council liaison assigned to brief us on first contact. Protocols. Vickers' side shed known this was. Coming put him through the view screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a civil servant. Health had smooth purple skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and tentacles that gestured expressively as he spoke. Admiral Vickers, I cannot express how grateful we are for your response, Telth began. His voice translated into English by the universal translator system, however. I must brief you on the proper protocols for first contact situations. The rules of engagement approved by the Galactic Council. In the importance of minimal force when how many hostages? Vickers interrupted. Blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. I'm sorry. The pirates have hostages, Vickers said with exaggerated patience. How many? Ah, yes. Approximately 15,000 Varani civilians are currently held in. And how long before your peacekeeping fleet arrives? 19 days at current projections. But Admiral, and the protocols are quite clear that Coordinator Telth, Vickers said, her voice dropping to something flat and cold. We will arrive at Kesset 7 in 72. Ours, we will assess the tactical situation. We will neutralize the hostile forces. We will recover the hostages. You can send me all the protocols you want, but I'm not going to read them. Do we understand each other? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long moment. You cannot simply attack without attempting diplomatic resolution. Telth finally said, his tentacles writhing with agitation. The Galactic Council has specific guidelines for Vickers. Muted the channel. Keep the text feed open. She told her comms officer, if he sends anything tactically relevant, let me know otherwise. I don't want to hear it. She turned back to the tactical display, studying the projected course to Kesset 772 hours. Pirates probably thought they had all the time in the world. They were about to learn that time was a luxury you only had until someone faster and meaner decided otherwise. All ships. Battle stations. She ordered, and someone find me everything we know about these Korthax Ravagers. I want to know how they fight, what they fly, and where it's going to hurt most when we hit them. The bridge crew moved to comply, their exhaustion falling away like a discarded coat. They might be tired, they might be traumatized, and they might be the worst possible choice for a first contact situation, but they were professionals they were very, very good at what they died in. Cassette 7. The Varani huddled in shelters and prayed to their various deities for salvation in the cold between stars. Human warships accelerated to velocities that made their inertial dampeners scream. And the Korthax flagship, a pirate lord named Vrek, laughed when his sensors detected the approaching human fleets. Such a small force. He thought such foolish aliens rushing to their deaths. He had no idea what was coming for him. None of them did. The human fleet cut through space like a knife through water, their drives burning at levels that made Coordinator Telth's instruments flash warning alerts. He sat in his observation pod aboard the Council monitoring station, watching the tactical display with growing horror. The humans weren't following standard fleet protocols. They weren't decelerating for safe system entry. They weren't requesting diplomatic channels with the Korthax. They were just coming fast and angry, like a bullet fired at the heart of Kesset 7. Telth had spent the past 2 days trying to educate Admiral Vickers on proper first contact procedure. Center 17 different documents covering everything from cultural sensitivity to the approved methods for requesting hostile forces to stand down, acknowledged receipt of exactly 0 of them instead. She'd sent him a single message: "Stay out of our way now." As the human fleet approached the outer markers of the Kesset 7 system, Telth watched his sensors and wondered if he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The Korthax Ravagers were no strangers to Violensteed, carved out a brutal reputation across 3 sectors, preying on soft targets and disappearing before military forces could respond. Their armada consisted of 43 vessels ranging from small raiders to their flagship, the Blood Price, a heavy cruiser that outmassed anything in the human fleet wreck. Their leader was a Korthax Prime, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and an exoskeleton that could shrug off small arms firehead. Been raiding for 30 years and had never lost a ship to anything but old age and poor maintenance when his sensors picked up the approaching human fleet. He felt something like amusement. 12 ships, his tactical officer reported, her mandibles clicking with what might have been laughter. Small mass readings. Unknown configuration, they're broadcasting a message. War Master Vrek gestured for her to play. Ita, human face, appeared on the screen. Female, with skin the color of dark earth and eyes that looked like frozen stone. Korthax vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Vickers of the Human Confederate Navy. The recording said you are engaged in acts of piracy and hostage taking against a civilian population. You have 20 minutes to power down your weapons, release all hostages, and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in the immediate destruction of your fleet. This is your only warning. The bridge of the Blood Price fell silent for a moment, then erupted in harsh Korthax laughter. 20 minutes. Vrek roared with delight. These humans think they can threaten us with their tiny fleet. Send them a response. His communications officer worked quickly, crafting an image-heavy message that showed previous victims of Korthax raids burning colonies, stripped cargo holds, the aftermath of their work. Run home. Little humans, Vrek's message concluded, this is not your fight, and you are not our equals. Leave now or join the Varanian chains. The response came back in under 10 seconds. It was an audio file, just 12 seconds long. Admiral Vickers, laughing not the polite laughter of diplomatic functions or the nervous laughter of fear. This was the laughter of someone who'd just heard the funniest joke of their life. Then her voice, still edged with amusement. Your 20 minutes started 3 minutes ago. 17 left. Choose wisely. Vrek's amusement curdled into anger. Battle formations. He snapped. Show these primitives what happens when they challenge the Korthax Ravagers. The human fleet didn't slow down. Coordinator Telth watched from his monitoring station. His tentacles knotted with anxiety. As the 2 fleets closed to combat range, the Korthax moved into a standard defensive formation, their heavy units forming a wall while lighter raiders positioned to flank it. Was textbook pirate tactics, designed to overwhelm and scatter any opposition. The humans did something that made Telth's translator hiccup in confusion. Unable to find proper words for the maneuver, they split their formation into 3 groups, each angling in from different vectors. Their approach speed still far too high for safe combat maneuvering. They're going to overshoot. Telth whispered to himself. At that velocity, they'll pass through the combat zone in seconds. Then the humans did something else that shouldn't have been possible. They flipped their ships and far end while maintaining their forward velocity. Their main drives now pointing at the enemy fleet hand. They Foritelth had seen weapons fire before, the elegant energy beams and guided missiles of civilized warfare. What the humans unleashed was something else entirely. Magnetic accelerators hurled projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed, each slug carrying kinetic energy that made his instruments scream. Point defense lasers created a web of light so dense it looked like solid walls. Missiles that pulled 40 gravity turns. Their onboard AI making decisions faster than any living pilot could match. The Korthax formation tried to respond, their plasma cannons firing in coordinated volleys, but the human ships were already somewhere else. Their velocity and maneuverability combined in ways that shouldn't work. A Korthax heavy cruiser took 3 railgun impacts in quick succession, its shields collapsing under the kinetic bombardment. Raider attempted to close for boarding range and found itself bracketed by point defense fire that shredded its hull in seconds, the blood price. Vrek's flagship fired its main plasma cannon. The shot was perfect. Tracking one of the human destroyers with lethal precision, the human ship rolled, presenting its narrowest profile. And the plasma blast passed close enough to boil away hull plating, but not close enough to cripple return. Fire from the destroyer sent a spread of missiles that curved around the blood price's defensive. Fire through maneuvers that pulled forces no living crew could survive. Two made it. Through the blood price rocked as its port shields failed impossible. Vrek roared, all four arms gripping his command throne. No species can maneuver like that. The G-forces alone should kill them. His tactical officer's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress, War Master. Their ships are pulling maneuvers at 40 standard gravities. No known species can survive above 12. What are they? On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Vickers watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Korthak's flagship is damaged, but still fighting. Commander Webb reported 3 raiders destroyed. 7 more with critical damage, all of our ships reporting minor damage. No casualties. Time to objective. 90 seconds until we're in boarding range. Ma'am. Vickers nodded. Signal all Marine detachments prepare for assault operations, and someone remind the Korthaks that their 20 minutes are up. The Marines of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet had been waiting in their drop pods for this moment. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez checked her armor seals one last time. The powered exoskeleton responding to her thoughts with mechanical precision around her. 30 other Marines did the same, their faces hidden behind helmets that made them look like armored monsters. Remember the brief. Lieutenant Shen's voice came through the squad. Come, Korthaks have 4 arms, thick exoskeletons. And they're strong, but they're used to fighting species weaker than them. We are not weaker than them. Hit hard, hit fast, and bring those hostages home. Rodriguez grinned inside her helmet. 18 months of fighting in the outer reaches. A simple boarding action against pirates felt almost relaxing. 30 seconds to launch. The pod operator announced. The Indomitable shuddered as it took another hit. But the ship's AI was already compensating. Rolling to present fresh armor. Launch in 3, 2, 1 mark. The drop pods fired like bullets from a gun, magnetic accelerators hurling them across the void toward the Korthak's vessels inside her pod. Rodriguez felt the acceleration press her into the crash couch. The forces that would liquefy most galactic species, barely registering through her armor and training 5 seconds later. Her pod hit the hull of a Korthak's raider with enough force to punch through the outer. Armor-shaped charges blew the pod's forward hatch, and Rodriguez was moving before the debris stopped flying. The Korthaks inside had maybe 2 seconds to register what was happening before armored humans poured into their ship like an avenging flood. Wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Back on his monitoring station, Coordinator Telth watched the tactical feed and felt something primal wake up in his species. Memory. The humans moved like nothing he'd ever seen, fighting in zero gravity and hard vacuum as if they'd been born to it. Their weapons roared in frequencies that his translator couldn't properly render. Their armor allowed them to punch through bulkheads that should have been impenetrable, and they were. Laughing through the open cum channels, Telth could hear human voices coordinating their assault. And between the tactical calls and targeting solutions, they were making jokes while clearing a hostile vessel deck by deck. Coordinator Telth. Admiral Vickers' voice cut through his paralysis. You might want to prepare medical facilities for refugees. We're bringing them home. Telth looked at his tactical display. At the Korthak's fleet dissolving under human assault? At the boarding actions that were already over and all but the final mop-ups event 2 hours ago? He'd called for help now. He wondered if he'd accidentally invited something worse than pirates into the galaxy. The battle for Cassette 7 lasted exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes from first shot to final surrender for most galactic conflicts. That would barely count as the opening skirmish for the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. It was another Tuesday. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez moved through the corridors of the Korthak's raider with her squad, their armor-mounted lights cutting through the smoke and darkness. The ship had lost power to most sections after the humans breached the reactor containment. An emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow clear. Corporal Jensen called out, his rifle trained on a junction that led to 3 different corridors. Hostiles are falling back to the cargo bays. Rodriguez nodded inside her helmet. The Korthax were tough and mean, but they'd never fought anyone who could match them physically. Before most galactic species topped out at maybe half human strength in standard gravity. Korthax could bench press most of them humans. Evolved under Earth's crushing gravity and shaped by hundreds of thousands of years as pursuit predators. Didn't have that problem. Rodriguez had watched a Korthax warrior, all forearms swinging, try to grapple with Private Chen, back at the initial breach point, who barely hit minimum height requirements for the Marines. Had simply grabbed 2 of those arms and used them as leverage to throw the alien into a bulkhead hard enough to crack its exoskeleton. The Korthax, Rodriguez reflected, had probably never been the small one in a fight before. Sergeant, we've got contact. Lieutenant Okonkwo's voice crackled through the cargo bay 3. Approximately 40 hostiles and twice that many civilians hostages are being used as shields. Acknowledged, Rodriguez replied. We're 2 minutes out. She picked up her pace, her armor's servos responding smoothly to her movements behind her. Her squad moved like a well-oiled machine, covering angles and watching each other's backs with the unconscious coordination of people who'd fought together too many times to count. They reached Cargo Bay 3 to find Lieutenant Okonkwo's platoon already in position, taking cover behind structural supports and disabled cargo loaders through her helmet's tactical display. Rodriguez could see the situation clearly. The Korthax had herded the Varani civilians into the center of the bay, using them as living shields while the pirates formed a defensive perimeter. The lead Korthax, bigger than the others and wearing some kind of ornamental armor, was shouting in a language her translator struggled with. What's he saying? Rodriguez asked, mostly threats. Okonkwo replied something about killing the hostages if we advance. Also some stuff about how we're cowards who hide behind metal suits. That's rich coming from the guy hiding behind civilians. Rodriguez studied the tactical display, her mind racing through options. A frontal assault would get people killed. And after 18 months of watching good people die, she was tired of funerals. Jensen, you still carrying those flashbangs? Always, Sergeant. Good, Rodriguez said. An idea forming. Here's what we're going to do. 3 minutes later, the cargo bay speakers crackled to life. Korthax warriors, a human voice said in surprisingly clear Korthax. Courtesy of the translator system, this is Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. Human Confederate Marines, you are surrounded, outgunned, and out of options. Release the hostages, and you will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on Armed Conflict. The lead Korthax spat something that the translator rendered as an extremely creative anatomical impossibility.
Axe!
He roared, we do not surrender to prey species. Come and take them if you dare. Rodriguez nodded to Jensen. Light them up. A dozen flashbang grenades arced through the air, deployed by the squad's grenade launchers, the Korthax, with their excellent vision adapted for low light rating, never saw them coming. The grenades detonated in a cascade of light and sound that overwhelmed the pirates' senses. The Varani, warned by a localized broadcast on their personal communicators exactly 3 seconds before the grenades went off, had their eyes closed and their hands over their ears. The humans, protected by their armor's automatic visual and audio dampening, weren't affected at all. Rodriguez and her squad moved before the light had faded, crossing the open space in bounds that their armor's enhanced strength made look easy. The Korthax were still reeling, their vision overloaded and their hearing scrambled. When armored humans crashed into them like a freight train, it was over in seconds. The lead Korthax, his vision clearing just enough to see the armored figure in front of him, tried to bring all 4 arms to bear in a crushing grapple. Rodriguez caught 2 of those arms in her gauntleted hands, twisted them with mechanical precision, and watched the alien go down. Screaming hostiles neutralized. She reported, civilians are secure. Someone get medical down here. Some of these people are in bad shape. Across the Korthax fleet, similar scenes played out. Human Marines, their armor making them look like walking tanks to the terrified Varani, cleared ship after ship with brutal efficiency and the blood price. War Master Vrek made his last stand in the command center. Surrounded by his personal guard commander, Webb led the assault personally. His power armor's shoulder-mounted autocannon chewing through the bulkhead like paper stand down, Webb ordered. His voice amplified by external speakers, "Your fleet is gone, your warriors are dead or captured, and you've got about 30 seconds before my Marines breach this compartment. Make the smart choice." Vrek looked around at his remaining guards, at the humans visible through the growing hole in his bulkhead, at the tactical display showing his fleet in ruins for the first time in his 30-year career. He felt something he'd only ever inflicted on others' fear. "We surrender," he said, his voice bitter under what terms. Webb's laugh was harsh. "You don't get to negotiate terms," he said. "Drop your weapons, get on the deck, and pray that the Admiral is feeling generous because I'm not 90 minutes after the first shot was fired." The last Korthax warrior was in custody. Admiral Vickers stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and surveyed the tactical display with tired satisfaction. Korthax vessels destroyed, 23 captured. 8 escaped into FTL before the humans could intercept them. Approximately 400 Korthax in custody, including Vrek himself. 15,000 Varani civilians recovered, though medical reports were still coming in on their condition. And on the human side, 3 injuries. No deaths. Commander Webb had taken a plasma burn when his armor's shield failed. Private Kowalski had broken 2 fingers when he punched a bulkhead instead of the Korthax who ducked Lieutenant. Chen had a concussion from a lucky hit that had rattled her inside her armor. 3 injuries. Vickers had seen training exercises with worse casualty rates. "All ships, stand down from battle stations," she ordered. "Maintain defensive positions around Kesset 7. Get our wounded to Sikba. And tell the Marine detachments good work." She turned to her communications officer. "Get me a channel to the planet. It's time we introduced ourselves properly on Kesset 7's surface." Planetary Governor Mirith had watched the battle from his emergency command center, his species equivalent of hands trembling with a mixture of relief and terror. The Korthax had held his world hostage for 6 days. Their threats growing more violent with each passing hour sent the distress signal knowing it was probably futile. That help would arrive too late if it arrived at all, and then the humans Kamamirith had never heard of humans before, had no idea they even existed until their fleet dropped out of FTL. Like an avenging storm, what he'd seen in the past 2 hours had shaken everything he thought he knew. About the galaxy, the humans fought with a savagery that made the Korthax look gentle. They moved in ways that should have killed them. Their weapons tore through shields and armor like they were made of paper, and they'd saved his people. Governor Mirith, his communications officer, said, her voice shaking. "We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." On screen, the holographic display flickered to life, showing a human female in a dark uniform. She was tall by Varani standards, probably massive by human ones, with dark skin and eyes that looked like they'd seen things Mirith couldn't imagine. "Governor Mirith, I'm Admiral Sarah Vickers of the Human Confederate Navy," she said. "My Marines are currently securing the Korthax vessels and processing the freed hostages. We'll be sending down medical teams and supplies within the hour. Are you and your government safe?" Mirith had to try twice before his voice worked. "We are safe, Admiral," he managed, "thanks to you and your people." "I don't know how to thank you for what." "You've done Vickers' expression, didn't it? Change. You can thank us by preparing shelters and medical facilities for your people," she said. "We pulled them off those ships, but some of them are going to need serious care. Our medics will help. But we're going to need your medical personnel to coordinate, of course." "Of course," Mirith said. "Whatever you need, Admiral will have everything ready." The transmission ended, and Mirith sagged in his chair. "Issue the orders," he told his staff. "Prepare the central hospital for mass casualties. Activate all emergency medical personnel. And for the ancestors' sake, someone figure out what humans eat so we can feed them." One of his aides raised a tentative hand. "Sir, should we prepare a welcome ceremony for when the humans land?" The human field hospital looked more like a military fortress than a medical facility. All armored walls and Marines standing guard with weapons that made the Varani nervous. Dr. Sarah Chen, trauma surgeon and lieutenant commander in the Confederate Navy Medical Corps, stood in the main triage area and tried not to let her exhaustion show. been operating for 16 hours straight, treating Varani refugees who'd suffered under Korthak's captivity. Injuries ranged from malnutrition to broken bones to psychological trauma that would take years to heal. Doctor, we've got another transport coming in. Corman Williams called out 20 refugees. Mixed injuries route the critical cases to surgery, stable ones to the observation ward. Chen replied automatically, and someone please find me more painkillers that won't put the Varani into cardiac arrest. That was the tricky part about treating alien. Species human medications were designed for Deathworld physiology. Intended to be way too strong for everyone else, one Varani patient had received a standard human dose of adrenaline and nearly died from heart failure. Now every medication had to be carefully calculated and adjusted, which slowed everything down. Chun was in the middle of setting a Varani child's fractured arm when Admiral Vickers walked into the hospital. The Admiral looked even more tired than Chun felt. Her uniform rumpled and dark circles under her eyes. "How are we doing, Doctor?" Vickers asked quietly. "We're doing," Chen replied. 230 patients treated so far. Another 100 waiting, no deaths. But that's more luck than medicine. These people were in bad shape. "Ma'am," Vickers nodded, watching as Chen finished the splint and sent the child off with a nurse. "I need you to do something for me." The Admiral said there's a meeting with the planetary governor in 2 hours. "I want you there," Chen blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, I'm a surgeon, not a diplomat, which is exactly why I want you there." Vickers replied, "The governor needs to see that we're not just weapons and armor. You've been saving his people's lives all day. That matters to hours later." Chen found herself in the governor's residence, standing next to Admiral Vickers and Commander Webb in a room full of Varani officials. Governor Mirith looked even smaller in person, his frame barely reaching Chin's shoulder. The other Varani officials looked equally nervous, their large eyes darting between the humans like prey animals watching predators. Admiral Vickers. Commander Dr. Mirith began, his translator rendering his speech into slightly formal English on behalf of the Varani people. "I want to express our deepest gratitude for your heroic rescue. You saved thousands of lives today." Vickers inclined her head slightly. "We did what needed to be done." "Governor, how can we help you rebuild?" Mirith seemed surprised by the question. "Help us rebuild? You've already done so much. We can provide engineering support, medical supplies, and security until the Galactic Council peacekeepers arrive." Vickers said, "My people are good at breaking things, but we're also pretty good at putting them back together." That was when things started to go wrong, though Chen wouldn't realize it until later. Admiral Vickers, trying to be reassuring, stood up to her full height to address the assembled Varani officials on Earth. In standard gravity, it would have been a normal gesture in Kasetsevin. With its lower gravity of about 0.8 g, Vickers seemed to tower over everyone in the room. The Varani officials collectively flinched backward. One of them actually fell out of their chair. Vickers froze, confusion crossing her face. "I'm sorry." "Did I? It's fine," Mirith said quickly, though his voice shook. "Please, Admiral, continue," but the damage was done. The rest of the meeting proceeded with the Varani officials clearly terrified, their answers getting shorter and more clipped as time went on. When Chen tried to explain the medical supplies they'd brought, she offered a nutrition bar as an example of the food supplements they could provide. What she didn't mention was that the bar contained enough stimulants, proteins, and nutrients to keep a human marine combat effective for 12 hours. Varani aide, who tried a small bite, ended up in the medical tent with tachycardia and what their doctor called dangerous levels of hyperactivity. Commander Webb, trying to lighten the mood, mentioned that the battle had been relatively light with minimal casualties. The Varani officials stared at him in horror. "Minimal?" One of them whispered, "We saw 3 of your ships take direct hits." "Yeah, but nobody died," Webb said, genuinely confused by their reaction. "Just some minor injuries." That's a good day by our standards. The silence that followed was profoundly uncomfortable, Chan realized, with growing horror that the Varani considered any combat casualty to be catastrophic. Their entire military doctrine was built around avoiding conflict, because their bodies were fragile and their medical technology couldn't handle serious trauma. The humans, who routinely walked off injuries that would kill most species, probably seemed insane to them. The meeting ended shortly after. With both sides thoroughly unsettled back at the field hospital, Chen found Staff Sergeant Rodriguez sitting on a supply crate, her armor stripped down to just the lower half, while a Varani medic nervously bandaged a cut on her arm. Sergeant, what happened? Chen asked. Rodriguez looked embarrassed. There was a structural collapse in Sector 7. She said some buildings the Corthax damage finally gave out. I was pulling civilians out of the rubble when a beam caught my shoulder. It's just a scratch. Chen examined the wound and felt her stomach drop. Just a scratch. Was a 5-inch laceration that would have sent most. The species into shock. Rodriguez had kept working for another 2 hours before someone convinced her to get it. Treated. You're benched for 24 hours, Chen said firmly. And you're taking the full course of antibiotics, Doc. I'm fine. That's an order. Sergeant Rodriguez grumbled, but complied. The Varani medic, whose name was Tellus, looked at Chen with something between awe and horror. Dr. Chen, how is she still conscious? Tellus asked. That injury would have killed most. Varani humans are built tough, Chen said, which was probably the understatement of the century. Over the next few days, more incidents piled. UPA, human engineer, trying to help rebuild a damaged shelter, accidentally used her full strength and snapped a support beam that was supposed to be load-bearing. A Marine started a makeshift school for displaced Varani children, teaching them basic math and reading. Had to be reminded 3 times to tone down the intensity because the kids found his drill sergeant teaching style terrifying. Captain Williams, the fleet's chief demolitions expert, helped clear rubble with plasma charges, but kept setting the yields too high because he was calibrating for materials that could withstand Earth standard stress loads. But there were good moments. Tuckerman Martinez, who'd lost his own daughter to the fighting in the outer reaches, spent every off-duty hour in the children's ward, reading translated stories and making the kids laugh. Despite the language barrier, Dr. Chun's surgical team worked themselves to exhaustion, developing new protocols for treating Varani physiology and training local doctors in trauma medicine. Commander Webb, despite his terrible bedside manner with officials, turned out to be surprisingly good with ordinary Varani citizens. His gruff honesty somehow more comforting than flowery diplomatic language. And gradually, the Varani started to see past the armor and the weapons to the exhausted, traumatized people underneath. Dr. Chen, Governor Mirith said, visiting the hospital on the 5th day, may I speak with you privately? They walked through the hospital gardens, where Varani refugees sat in the sunlight and tried to process their trauma. I wanted to apologize, Mirith said quietly, for our reaction at the meeting. We were ungrateful and rude. Chen shook her head. You were scared. She said, I get it. We're not exactly what you expected, no. Mirith agreed. You're not. When I called for help, I expected diplomats or peacekeepers, professional soldiers at worst. What I got was, he struggled for words, warriors. Chen supplied. Broken, angry warriors who've seen too much combat and not enough rest. I know we're terrifying. Governor, we terrify ourselves sometimes. Mirith was quiet for a moment. You're Sergeant Rodriguez, he finally said, the one who was injured in the collapse. I spoke with some of the people she rescued. They said she kept going back into the building over and over, even as it was falling apart. She pulled out 12 people, then she went back for their pets. Chen smiled despite herself. That sounds like Rodriguez. How can someone be so gentle and so violent at the same time? Mirith asked, how can your people save lives with the same hands that take them so efficiently? It was a good question, and Chen didn't have a good answer. We're human. She finally said, we're capable of terrible things and wonderful things. Sometimes in the same hour we fight because we have to. But we'd rather heal. We're just not always given the choice. Mirith nodded slowly. The Galactic Council peacekeepers will be here in 8 days, he said, when they arrive. What will you do? We'll go home, Chen said, back to Earth. Back to our families, back to trying to forget the things we've done and seen. Will you forget us? Chen looked out at the hospital, at her staff working themselves to exhaustion for people they'd never met before. At Marines who fought like demons and cared for refugees like parents. No, Governor, she said quietly, I don't think we'll ever forget you. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to inspire awe and cooperation. A massive space with seats arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking Platform representatives from 243 civilizations filled those seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Admiral Sarah Vickers stood on the central platform in her dress uniform and wondered how the hell she'd ended up here instead of on a beach somewhere drinking. Heavily days had passed since the battle at Kesset 7. The Varani refugees were recovering. The Korthax prisoners were in council custody. And the third expeditionary fleet should have been halfway home by now instead. Vickers had received a strongly worded request to appear before the full council to address concerns regarding human military actions and future integration into galactic society. Which was diplomatic speak for "you scared everyone and now we need to figure out what to do with you," Coordinator Telth, who'd apparently been assigned as humanity's unofficial liaison, stood nervously at the edge of the platform. "Admiral, please remember," he whispered urgently, "the Council values diplomatic discourse and measured responses. Avoid aggressive language. Maintain respectful tone in whatever you do." "Don't I'll try not to start a war, Vickers," said dryly the Council speaker. An ancient being from a species called the Valorians raised one crystalline appendage for silence. "This session of the Galactic Council is now in order," the speaker announced, their voice resonating through the chamber's translation systems. "We gather to address the recent events at Kesset 7 and the actions of the species known as humanity." "Admiral Sarah Vickers, you have been called to testify regarding your fleet's intervention." Vickers stepped forward. "I'm here." "Speaker, ask your questions," a murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Apparently, that wasn't the properly respectful way to address the council. "Admiral." Vickers, a representative from the Therian Collective, spoke up, their tentacles waving with agitation. "Your forces destroyed 12 vessels and killed approximately 200 sentient beings. How do you justify such excessive violence?" Vickers felt her jaw tighten. "The Korthax Ravagers were holding 15,000 civilians hostage," she said, keeping her voice level. "They'd already killed an unknown number during their initial assault. We used the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat and recover the hostages' minimum force." Another representative, this one from the Pelthian Assembly, stood up. "You obliterated ships that were attempting to surrender." "No, we obliterated ships that were still firing on us." Vickers corrected. "The vessels that actually surrendered were captured intact. Check your own reports, but the loss of life was a direct result of the Korthax choosing to fight rather than surrender." Vickers interrupted. "We gave them 20 minutes warning. We offered terms. They chose violence. They simply chose to be better at it." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, representatives arguing among themselves. The speaker called for order, their crystalline form flashing with light. "Admiral, the Council is concerned about humanity's apparent disregard for proper conflict resolution protocols." The speaker said, "Your fleet bypassed all attempts at diplomatic negotiation with respect." "Speaker, there's no negotiating with someone who's holding a gun to a child's head." Vickers replied, "The Korthax weren't interested in diplomacy. They were interested in plunder and terror. Someone had to stop them. But why did it have to be done with such brutality?" The Therian representative pressed, "Why not wait for proper peacekeeping forces?" Vickers felt something cold settle in her chest. "Because your proper peacekeeping forces were 3 weeks away," she said, her voice dropping to something flat and dangerous. 3 weeks. Do you know what the Korthax could have done in 3 weeks? How many people would have died while you debated proper protocols?" "The Admiral has a point." A new voice spoke up. Governor Mirith stepped forward from the observer section, his small frame dwarfed by the massive chamber speaker. "If I may address the Council." The speaker gestured assent. Mirith climbed onto a platform that raised him to speaking height. "The human fleet arrived 72 hours after we sent our distress signal," he said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness in that time. "The Korthax had killed 400 of my people and were threatening to kill thousands more. The humans didn't bypass diplomacy because they're violent. They bypassed it because there was no time, and for one, I'm grateful they did, Governor." "We understand your gratitude," the Pelthian representative said gently. "But surely you can see the danger in allowing a species this militarily powerful to operate without proper oversight." "I see the danger in a galaxy where peaceful species have no protection except strongly worded letters and peacekeepers who arrive too late to matter." Mirith replied, "The humans saved my world. They didn't ask for payment, didn't demand territorial concessions, didn't impose their culture on us. They fought, they healed, and they prepared to leave? How is that dangerous? Vickers watched the council's reaction with tired eyes. She could see the fear in their faces. The uncertainty had built a civilization. On the assumption that everyone would play by their rules, humanity had just proved that some problems required different rules. The council's concern, the speaker said carefully, is not about the humans' actions at Kesset 7. Specifically, it is about the precedent this sets. You have demonstrated capabilities that exceed any current military force. You fight with a ferocity that most species find disturbing. And you come from a world so hostile that your normal operating parameters would kill most of us. What happens when human interests conflict with galactic interests? What happens when you decide that our rules don't apply to you? The chamber fell silent. Waiting for Vickers' response, she was exhausted, angry, and so very tired of politics, but she was also a professional speaker. Members of the council, she began, choosing her words carefully. You're right to be concerned. Humanity is dangerous. We evolved on a death world that tried to kill us every single day. We developed weapons and tactics that reflect that reality, and yes, by your standards, we're violent and aggressive and probably terrifying. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. But here's what you need to understand. We didn't want this. We didn't ask to be. The people who are good at violence, we'd much rather be scientists or artists or diplomats. Most of my crew would trade their rifles for paintbrushes in a heartbeat. But the universe doesn't care what we want. It cares about what we can do, and what we can do is fight when fighting is necessary. You built a civilization based on peace and cooperation. Vickers continued, that's admirable. That's beautiful. Honestly, but you built it knowing that someone, somewhere, would have to enforce that peace when words weren't enough. You just never thought about who that someone would be. Are you suggesting that humanity should become the Council's military arm? The Therian representative asked, suspicion clear in their voice. I'm suggesting that we're already filling that role, whether you like it or not. Vickers replied, the Korthax are spreading word through the galactic underworld. Right now they're telling everyone that humans are not to be messed with. Pirate raids in 3 sectors have already dropped by 40% according to your own intelligence reports. That's not because of Council peacekeepers. That's because predators just learned there's something higher on the food chain. The silence that followed was profound. So what do you want from us, Admiral? The speaker finally asked. Vickers took a deep breath. I want to go home, she said simply. I want my people to rest, to heal, to try to become whole again after everything we've been through. I want humanity to be part of your galactic community, to trade and share knowledge and maybe learn how to be a little less violent. But I also want you to understand that if another Kesset 7 happens, if someone calls for help and you can't get there in time, we will respond not because we're conquerors or because we want to impose our will, but because it's the right thing to do, and we will not stand by and watch innocent people suffer when we have the power to help. Even if that help comes with armor and guns and methods that make you uncomfortable. The council chamber erupted again. Some representatives arguing for immediate integration, others demanding restrictions. Still others calling for humanity to be quarantined through it all. Vickers stood on the platform and waited. Finally, after what felt like hours, the speaker called for a vote. The resolution that passed was a compromise that satisfied no one and everyone at once. Humanity would be granted probationary membership in the Galactic Council. Human military forces would be permitted to operate in council space, but would be subject to review and oversight. A joint commission would be established to develop protocols for human intervention in crisis situations, and most importantly, humanity would be officially recognized as the Council's rapid response force for situations requiring immediate military action.